it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
Scottie Scheffler has once again shown off his dominance. He held off Collin Morikawa in the final round of the Memorial to get his fifth victory of the year, becoming the first player since Tiger Woods to win the Players, Masters, and Memorial in the same season. Nate, you were there and successfully predicted the winning score. Take a victory lap.
Yeah, I don't want to pat myself too much on the back for that. I've had some picks go awry in that sense too a little bit this season. So, but it does definitely feel like to get one right. Josh, it was looking like it wasn't going to be that. Well, after the first round, they got a lot of rain over there on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, those guys went crazy, got the lead to about 6 under. And then you see Scottie finish out only a couple strokes better than that. So that was pretty shocking. The change in the greens was the biggest thing that I saw that led to that scoring change. Right, we saw guys on Thursday stop the ball on a dime, on these approach shots and do whatever they want with the ball. And then by the end of the day, Sunday, you couldn't get the ball to stop on the green in some spots. There, you really had to be tricky on where you played your shots, to what parts of the greens and what flags too. I think it was Collin Morikawa in his post round press conference was talking about a dramatic change to the greens throughout the course of the week, and that's definitely not far off in my opinion.
Yeah, I think watching the broadcast, the firmness of the greens was by far the biggest factor. I mean, it was a hard golf course to begin with. It always is. It's never like a high scoring affair. But then, we watched Scottie Scheffler, who's had unbelievable control of his distance with his irons, absolutely struggle coming down the stretch on Sunday. He's bouncing through greens. Collin was doing the same thing, bouncing through greens. They're looking at Scottie's looking at Ted Scott like, what on earth is going on? Collin had a couple of those moments as well. And then you add in the fact that the rough was incredibly unforgiving.
It was just dense, so dense. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what was that? Like, did it look as dense as it clearly played for the Players over the weekend?
So it was funny because if you look right at it, initially you think, oh, that's not too bad. That rough, that's manageable, I think. And then when you really, get into it and you look at that density of the rough and how challenging it is for the players, especially around the greens or on the green sides too, it does make it really, really tough for these guys. There was a couple times where guys just misjudged it totally and they catch a flyer out of the rough and it sails over the green and, you're landed onto a cement green, especially on that Sunday too. So that made it definitely very challenging for the players.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago when we were talking before the PGA, we were saying that, really long par threes are tough for the average golf fan to watch because it doesn't offer a lot of scoring. How do you think this ranked in terms of the average golf fan watching? Because I'm watching on Sunday and I'm thinking down the stretch, these guys are just hobbling in with pars and bogeys. Scottie, I think, shot 75 in that final round. So, or 74 or 75.
74, I think, yeah.
So, not a high scoring affair at all. Do you think this is a popular one for all golf fans or more for the purist?
I think it falls somewhere in the middle there. We've seen lately, especially at the PGA, where it was a real low scoring event. And I think we were kind of due for a higher scoring event. We're going to see another one next week at the US Open at Pinehurst. So I think that's interesting, right? And especially with it just being Jack Nicklaus's course, we need to see an event, that's around that 800 number that won it. And I think they got what they wanted. And I think Jack significantly got what he wanted after seeing, Adam Hadwin rip out to a 600 lead on Thursday. And then it kind of regressed towards the mean. So, Josh, I think it kind of falls in the middle there between who likes it and what scoring people like.
Yeah, I think these types of events, I think it's good that it's an elevated event and that it's Jack's event.
Right. It's a test. Yes, that's for sure.
It works for that. But if this is what it was week in and week out, like we hear some, right. Folks on social media say they wish it was, it would be unwatchable. People wouldn't want to watch, these guys, struggle to make pars, bogeys. That's not what people want to see. It's not exciting.
Right. Yeah. You still need those wedge contests and see how good these guys are, to get the ball in the proximity of the hole and knocking in putts. I think a good history, a good mix of both is good. And Josh, we've certainly seen the easier side the last few tournaments ish. So it's good to kind of flip it around. And like you said, just being Jack's event, it's huge for that.
Yeah. And I think, really when I think about the player events, so let's exclude the players, but when I think about the API, when I think about the Genesis, when I think about the Memorial, Tiger, Arnie, and Jack's tournaments, like to me, those are the ones that should have, the really heavy rough, the really dried out greens, the really firm play like that. Those are the ones that should have it. Cause then the rest of the events can be more, say they all need to be like wedge contests, like a, Sony Open kind of deal. But, give us some scoring where the winning number is like 15 to 18 under.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good mix is definitely good in that sense too. And coming at the right time is important.
All right. Let's talk about the winner, Scottie Scheffler. Like I said in the intro there, shows once again why he's the best golfer on the planet. You watched it up close and personal. You saw it Saturday. You saw it Sunday. Sunday he didn't have his best stuff by any means. What was it like watching that unfold?
It's just so cool with Scottie, the recovery. Like it was Saturday, he makes that triple bogey on 9. He hits one out of play and ends up making a triple bogey. He comes back, birdies 10. So I just think some of the bounce back ability by Scottie Scheffler is just incredible. Makes that, I think it was like a 15-footer on 16 for par, and then he misses a short one on 17 for par, and then gets up and down on 18 to win the event. So it's pretty cool for that from that sense. But yeah, like he said, and like everyone has said, he just didn't have his best stuff on Sunday, but still converts to the victory. Pretty cool. And watching Scottie, he just has a dominating presence out there. Just such a fun experience to watch him. Everyone's out there rooting for him. He's a fan favorite, that's for sure. So just watching him dominate and sulk around the golf course is pretty cool because he really does have that commanding presence to him.
Yeah, I think, from the broadcast perspective, watching it on TV, this was, I saw almost every shot Scottie hit the last 2 days. And honestly, this was the worst he looked in the last year.
Yeah, agreed.
This was borderline, as far as his putting went, borderline what we had seen last year before he figured it out. And he really uncharacteristically drove the ball poorly. He's in the rough a lot.
Right.
Missed a lot of drives. You mentioned the triple. The triple was started by an absolute double cross that went so far left it was out of play completely. I mean, That is just... You want to talk about uncharacteristic of Scottie Scheffler, the guy who's just so automatic. I mean, he's just simply automatic out there. And yet he still won. And when you look at the strokes gained numbers, he gained 14 strokes on the field and approach to the green. 14 strokes. That's crazy. Like for him to have struggled putting, struggled driving the ball consistently, and even at times on Sunday struggled with his iron control, his approach control, to still gain that much on the field, win, and do the things in clutch time that he needed to do. That putt on 18, that little slider downhill with the entire tournament on the line when you knew Colin was going to turn around and make the uphill, basically reverse putt of what he had. That was big. That was a big moment, especially because he had been sliding back to the field the whole day.
Yeah, Josh, I think would you say that's one of the more, after he makes that putt, more emotional Scottie Schefflers we've seen on the 18th green?
The most.
Yeah, and that's because, I think that's because Bo's there for the first time, is first child. And so everything that Scottie's gone through, we've talked about the arrest, we've talked about becoming a dad for the first time. So I think that's probably why. But Josh, that was pretty cool on the 18th green, seeing the emotion out of Scottie Scheffler, because he's usually, pretty low key in that moment. We like to talk about him as a guy that his emotions don't really sway either way on the golf course when things are going poorly or things are going well. So that was fun to see.
Yeah, I almost wonder, and we'll never know for sure, but I almost wonder if part of the reason why we saw a little more emotion out of him yesterday after he made that putt was because that moment made it click in his brain that he doesn't need his best stuff to win.
That too, yeah.
Because that, I have to imagine, I mean, he is dominated, right? Like pretty much every time he's won, he's dominated with very limited exceptions. He's closed really well, but for him to have been pushed the way he was pushed, I have to imagine that this felt quite a bit different for him than some of his other victories. I mean, going back to that triple you mentioned, I think you and I were texting Saturday night, and, if not for that triple, he would have walked into Sunday with a 7-stroke lead. Not saying yesterday wouldn't have played out the way it did, but I think yesterday might have played out a little differently if he walked in and teed off on the first hole Sunday with a 7-stroke lead over Colin Morikawa.
Yeah, it could have for sure. But on the other hand, though, he does come back with that birdie on 10. He eagles 15 with those 2 spectacular shots, and then he makes birdie at 18 on Saturday. Yeah. So that you could talk about that either way, I think. But still, just being able to, he knows, like you said, he knows he can win without his best stuff, and he builds that 4-shot lead, and he did that for a reason, right? This isn't a golf course. He knows that coming in where you're just going to shoot 69 without really blinking. And I think that proved it on Sunday. I think the low score was 69 or 68. 3 or 4 under par was a low score. There was a couple of them. Yeah. And there really wasn't that many guys under par, Josh. It's pretty incredible to play an under par round on Sunday at the Memorial with how hard those greens were and how hard they were playing in terms of their firmness. I think that's some really good golf. And, Colin really did a lot to chase after him, but Scottie just was able to fend him off.
Yeah. I mean, shooting 68 or 69 when you're 5, 6, 7, 8 strokes back or out of it, isn't the same as charging when you're in the final group with the best golfer the planet has seen in the last 20 years, a few strokes ahead of you and still charging. That is a different level of really great golf. Speaking of him, where does this leave him? This is, I don't want to call it a close call, but he's had a few close calls. Where does Colin Morikawa go from here?
So I got on Colin a little bit at the PGA Championship when he was in that final group, and he didn't make a birdie until the 18th hole, right? At Valhalla, where birdies were going like crazy, but this time was completely different. I mean, from the jump, Colin jumped on him, and I thought that was really impressive from Morikawa. He hit some really incredible shots. He makes a big putt on 17 to cut the lead down to 1, staying on the 18th tee box, and then Josh, he's just behind the green on 18. And he almost hoops the chip. I mean, he chips it and it rolls right by the hole. His reaction was awesome. He goes, I don't know how that doesn't break right. And it goes, just sails just left of the hole. And then Scottie knocks that in. I mean, Josh, if Scottie misses that putt, there is no doubt in my mind Colin Morikawa makes that 4-footer, that uphill 4-footer, and we go play 18 again. And then who knows what happens. So I think this was a really impressive showing from Colin Morikawa.
Yeah, I mean, look, he drove the ball better. I'm just looking at the stats right now. He drove the ball better than Scottie. He played better around the greens than Scottie. He putted better than Scottie. Other than approach to green, where he was still in the top 5, he had the better all-around statistical performance than Scottie Scheffler did. But it's just a difference of where he was coming from. And, I'm stuck in this weird spot right now because I don't like Scottie, or I don't like Colin coming up in the US Open or in the Open Championship for that matter. But I think I think his game is sharp enough where he could win any week and I wouldn't necessarily be shocked. So,
I mean, yeah, he's won the Open Championship before, right? I mean, I don't see why not. The US Open can be tough for him, but he's shown he's played well at tough golf courses that are long, especially the Memorial. I mean, it's like the fifth longest golf course they play on tour all season, and Morikawa showed, or more than showed, I guess I could say, that he can contend and possibly win that event. So I wouldn't really be surprised though if he does. But yeah, I see where you're coming from.
I mean, look, like if anything, especially the last 2 days, one could easily make the argument that the golf course set up like a US Open venue.
He's so consistent, Colin. He doesn't seem like he misses a lot of shots.
It's that ball striking.
I know he's even in like live watching him and watching him hit some of those lower irons. It's so cool. I think he's one of my more favorite golf swings on tour just because of how consistent he is. It's always the back of the ball and it's the same swing every single time. It doesn't seem like he misses. Sometimes, I think I sent a text to you throughout the weekend. I don't know how this guy doesn't win every week just by watching him and how incredible he is. But he certainly will. 2-time major champion, and he's going to continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to have him back on tour, though, Josh. We seemed to miss him for a little bit of time, but now he seems back in the fold. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think there was definitely that slump. But like, look, if anything, if we're going to point to a part of his game that's really improved, much like Scottie over the last 5 months or so, Colin's putting with some serious confidence. And,
Yes.
that changes things. I think the putting was really the most impressive thing out of his charge yesterday was that, he made some really consequential putts in the early part of that round that set the tone. And, to me, that's the big difference maker. But let's talk about the opposite end of that spectrum. Victor Hovland, we both had high expectations for him coming in and looked good in the first 2 rounds. Then the wheels fall off. He shoots 77, 75 over the weekend. Had a string. I can't recall whether I think it might have been Saturday where he had a string of like 5 bogeys in about 7 or 8 holes. I really did think that he had found it, but he looked completely uncomfortable on Saturday and Sunday. And I'm just starting to wonder now if maybe this was a 2 steps forward, 1 step back situation.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're looking after round 2 and how he played so well, especially on Friday. And I think I made it in the video that I posted to TikTok and Instagram. He's the guy that I think can push here, and he does the exact opposite. Guy who won here last year and has showed he has the game for it, right? And just a couple, I don't know if you want to call them mistakes, but they just kind of bunched up together on Saturday on that back 9. And he just kind of comes unraveled, right, Josh? And it's interesting to see where we go from Victor. I would assume we're putting that behind us and we're moving on to the U.S. Open. That's coming up this week. And we'll see what happens with Victor. But yeah, definitely strange to see.
Yeah, definitely was. Another tidbit we learned over the weekend, or at least I had seen and heard it during the broadcast, Ludwig Aubert has been playing with a partially torn meniscus. Obviously, we've kind of been on the fence line with picking him, not picking him. He's still playing well. Like, he's not playing poorly. But what are your expectations now for him, knowing that he's got a partially torn meniscus? That means, according to his camp, he's going to play through the rest of the season, and then they're going to evaluate it during the off season, whether he needs to have surgery or whether he's going to be able to PT his way out of this thing. What are your expectations? Does this, for you, take him out of the potential winners camp?
Not necessarily, Josh. I think if you were to just look at him at the golf tournament, you're not going to really think anything's wrong. I knew there was something up with that knee. Obviously wasn't listening to the broadcast, so I didn't hear it in real time there when they were talking about that meniscus issue. But Josh, he looks fine. He looks fine, and he's a very stoic player, right? He doesn't really do a lot of emotional changes on the golf course, and just kind of has that presence to him. So I think he'll be fine in that sense. But it is interesting to hear about that and see what he does, what happens to him going forward. It definitely is going to hamper him, but he doesn't really show it, especially on the greens.
Yeah, according to the reporting, and it was someone off of the CBS team who had reported it. The issue isn't when he's swinging, it's when he's walking. So he doesn't feel it while he's swinging the golf club, but when he's walking, he feels it. That just makes me think about, like, kind of the Tiger issue, I guess, which is, does his leg start to fatigue because he favors it a little bit late Saturday or Sunday?
It reminds me a little bit of Brooks. I don't remember that exact injury that Brooks had. It's very similar, though, and it really came on the greens. I mean, we saw Brooks really struggle to read putts and really struggle on the greens and not look like that Brooks Koepka. So that could be really a factor for Ludwig going forward here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Before we get into some U.S. Open preview talk here, we got a couple other stories to talk about. First, the viral video from St. Andrews. Player hits a shot from near a hotel towards the 18th green at St. Andrews. Officials at St. Andrews come out and say it's irresponsible. Obviously, it doesn't stop the video from going viral. The video goes viral. You got a lot of mixed reaction online. I think I came across the video late Friday, and I saw that it had a lot of views and it had gotten a lot of traction, but I didn't think it was going to warrant an actual response from anyone at St. Andrews. And I don't know, when these types of situations come up, I always think to myself, if you really don't want anybody doing it, is it a good idea to put out a statement that isn't actually going to stop anybody from doing it in the future, but draw more attention to the original act that you were trying to prevent from happening again?
Yeah. It was a cool video, though. You got to say that. It was a very cool video and a really cool swing. I don't have the guy's name in front of me either, but Josh, he hits that ball off concrete and he pierces the golf ball. He doesn't touch anything on the ground too. So just an absolutely cool shot. Almost lands on the green too. I think it would just land up just over a hair touch, I think. So that was pretty cool to see in the roads right next to St. Andrew and how historic and cool a venue that is. Yeah, Josh. But yeah, I see where the downsides are, but a pretty cool thing that I saw on the internet. Yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that. As long as social media exists, stuff like that is always going to happen, and it's not just going to be St. Andrews. It's going to be all over the place. I mean, it's very similar. I think it's very similar to like where people are having fun with cards, driving through bunkers, playing bumper cars with cards and stuff like that. As long as internet golf and YouTube golf and everything, not necessarily YouTube golf, but as well as golf is on the internet and doing these kind of numbers, it's going to continue happening. Stuff like this is going to continue happening, and I don't think a statement's going to stop it. Unavoidable for sure. Okay, so we got an update from the PGA Tour comms team, the negotiating committee, we'll call them, about the work being done to unify golf and bring the LIV guys and PGA Tour guys together. It was a whole lot of nothing. So I posted a video on social media over the weekend, and suffice it to say that we learned nothing new, and most golf fans are just ready for a deal. Like, we're tired of this. We know what's being debated behind the scenes, and it's money, nothing else. So really, we just need to stop talking about, bettering the game or any of this other stuff. Quietly negotiate how much money or how much more money guys like Patrick Cantlay and Rory McIlroy are going to get for being loyal to the PGA Tour. And figure out how to get the best players in the world from both tours competing in a series of events. For my money, I said it in that video. I'll say it again here. I'm sticking with the idea that we need a series of, say, 6 to 8 global opens that become super elevated events where guys from both tours can play. It would essentially give us 10 to 12 opportunities a year to see all players, and I'm talking about majors as well there, to see everyone playing together instead of just seeing them play together 4 times a year, which is what we got right now. I don't want to hear any more chatter. And then you can really amplify, like you were saying, you can really go off like the RBC Canadian Open and take off Canada. You can go to Australia. You can go to all these different countries and play off that. But Josh, it comes down for me when we're in the meat of the golf season, especially in a major week. I'll talk about this in October. I'll talk about this in February, January, till I'm blue in the face, right? But right now, in the middle of June or in the beginning of June here, when we're in a major week, I feel like Mr. Nicklaus. Just let me know when it happens, and I'll watch the golf. And once they put a tee in the ground, Josh, it doesn't matter, and we're gonna figure it out eventually. But yeah, I think I side with Jack on this side. Just let me know when it happens. Yeah, I'm with you, and I think most golf fans, especially casual, not golf to be fans, blunt, but. You. It's true. It's true. Because we've seen at this point, really at this point, we all know what the outcome is going to be. To some degree, these guys are going to be playing together again. So just get us there. Just get us there. That's it. I mean, it was a year ago, almost to the date, right? June 6th, 2023, when the big, huge announcement came out. And Josh, I said this last week. I'm going to say it again. We know maybe less than what we knew a year ago about this whole merger. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. All right, let's talk U.S. Open. It is a major week. And like you said, that's what we should be talking about. Opening thoughts. Anything you're watching heading into this week? Most thing I'm watching is just Pinehurst, about how cool of a resort that is. People talk about Pinehurst in the ranks of American golf, right? About it being one of the more prominent places in our country too that shows golf. And it's just such a cool thing. I've gotten really wound up when, watching the U.S. Open. They put out some great stuff on socials. They put a good one on Instagram this morning where they're just showing different videos from different holes. And, you see Tiger Woods walking around the golf course and getting ready for this U.S. Open. He's playing a practice round this morning with some other big guns. So I just think that's really cool, Josh. And it's just the U.S. Open and it has that feel to it, right? It has that big game feel to it on Pinehurst number 2. It's going to play difficult. It played very difficult last time we played it in 14 with I think it was only 3 guys that were under par. Martin Keimer won that year. He won by a significant amount, but there was only a couple of guys under par that year. So Josh, I think I'm just looking at the golf course the most in terms of this for the US Open.
Yeah, this golf course can be absolutely brutal to play. I think I've been watching the player side of this more. I think it's obviously, to your point, the course is going to be a challenge. It's going to test the guys. I think we're going to see another low scoring affair. So we're not going to see a ton of, I don't think we're going to get to 15 under par or anything like that. But seeing Bob Herrig report this morning that Adam Scott will be competing in the field at the US Open, that's huge for me. Like, that's massive news, because I was super critical of the USJ for not giving him an exemption like Tiger had received the last time we recorded this podcast, and seeing that he made his way into the field just makes me feel good. The guy's a future Hall of Famer, in my opinion. What he's done for the game since, say, the early 2000s, late 90s, when he came onto the scene, absolutely huge. He's a force in golf, and he's not playing that bad. Like, in my mind, the thing that was most inexcusable is just to not let a guy into a field who was so close to just qualifying automatically.
Right.
Like, just without going through the local qualifiers or anything like that. He was literally just like a place or two away from qualifying. Just give him the invite. It's not that hard. But now we see he's going to be in there. We're not exactly sure how. Apparently it has something to do with world rankings. Maybe Grayson Murray not being included in the list, even though he's still in the top 60 in the world by play. So yeah, that's where it is. And to me, that's the biggest headline that we've gotten so far heading into the US Open, that the streak, I think, which goes up to 93 now after this week, is still intact.
Yep, 93 this week, and a great outcome after all that happens. Josh, he's already in the Open Championship. He's already qualified for that, so that's 94. You go to the Masters next year, he's already in that. That's 95. You look at the PGA, he's not technically in it yet, but I think they take the top 100 in the world, so he'll be in that, you would think.
Yep.
And then, Josh, I hope we don't have to do this next year. I hope we don't get a year at Oakmont next year at the U.S. Open, and we talk about whether Adam Scott is in the field or not. Hopefully he just plays well the next calendar year and he's inside that top 60. He's solidified. So let's hope for that, Josh, and we don't have to do this all over again.
I hope we're just at a point by next year where guys, whether it's guys like Adam Scott or, the best players over at LIV, they're getting invites. Let's just get the best players who are playing golf in their respective corners of the world in this event. If they don't make the cut, they don't make the cut. So, right. That to me is just like the number one priority. Get the people in the tournament that people want to see. First time winner. What do we think the odds are that we see a first time winner? I want to qualify this because I know what you're going to say. I know Scottie Scheffler, if he won, would be a first time winner, but let's be real. The guy's like 3 or 4 to 1 to win.
Yeah, he's 3 to 1 as of this morning. It's insane. He's not. He is a first time winner, but he's not. I mean, he's won majors already. He hasn't won the U.S. Open yet. I mean, I don't think. I think if you depending on how you qualify that, I don't think it's possible a first time winner. I just think this golf course is so hard. But Scottie Scheffler exists, so there's an interesting intrigue there. But yeah, I don't think if we're talking about a first time winner in terms of not a major winner, I don't think it's possible. I think it's a very good percentage chance that someone that's won a major already will win. So sorry to guys like Patrick Cantlay. I don't really like it for you guys this week. But most of these big guys have won a major already, I guess. So I guess more of the bigger question too, Josh, do you think a winner comes out of the top 5 in the odds? So if you were taking Scotty, Rory, and a couple other of those guys, would you take them or the field in that sense?
So I'm looking at the top 5, and I've got Scotty, Rory, Xander, Brooks, Rahm. I guess, yeah, there's 5. I'm almost taking Scotty against the field. Like, look, I don't.
Yeah, it's probably a better question than the top 5.
Like, I'm taking Scotty against the field because I think if it's Scotty against the other 4 guys in the top 5 in terms of odds, I'm taking Scotty. Like, someone could offer me the other 4 guys in the top 5 or Scottie Scheffler, and I'm taking Scottie Scheffler.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen anything to show us that he can't be trusted in that situation to lead. I mean, we are at a point, right, where we know he's going to go out and he's not going to win every week. It's golf. Like, you can't win every time you go out and play. But like, this is maybe the second time in the last 40 years in professional golf where you could look at somebody and confidently say they have a better chance of winning than everyone else by a country mile, and it ain't close. And that's it. Like, coming into it, when we were talking about just first time winners, like, if Ludwig didn't have this partially torn meniscus, I would really be compelled to pick him. I mean, he played really well at Augusta, and it was his first time there.
Right.
I think most guys, I don't know. I think most guys would say that Augusta is harder to play blind, so to speak, than Pinehurst is. So I don't know. Like, to me, it maybe more comes down to what conditions are like, how soft is the course going to be, because that could really play a pretty big role.
Looks like it's going to be pretty hot.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, of course, it's going to be warm. North Carolina in June, that'll happen. But yeah, it's for me, it's Scottie and everybody else, and it's boring to say that, but I would love to see Aubert win a major this year. If he could muster it, I'd love to see it. It would be so good for golf.
I've gotten on this podcast and talked about how it's really hard to win back-to-back weeks, and then Scotty's proved me wrong now a couple times. The week after the Masters, he goes and wins the RBC Heritage. So I won't say it's hard to win 2 weeks in a row, but it is. But if there's anyone that can do it, it's Scotty. So yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. 3-1 at a major is really cool in terms of the golf betting odds. I think he was right around 360 or 380 ish. And I think a lot of people bet him, including myself, at the Memorial. So I think the books are really cautious in putting Scotty better than 3-1. I think they're in a kind of a weird spot. So we'll see what happens this week. But yeah, Scotty is most definitely going to be in contention on Sunday.
So what would this would be like? I don't know, like 6 wins out of his last 10 starts if he did win this week. I mean, it's hard to just do that. Like, it's hard to maintain. Like, you talk about hard to win back to back. At some point, this whole deal of like, hard to just keep up this insane pace that he's been on over the last like 4 months, right?
Right. And Josh, he hasn't won at like easy golf courses. I mean, he's won at very, very difficult, high profile golf courses at the Memorial, where they require the Memorial, the Masters. It's these golf courses that have required your best stuff. And especially the Masters this year played a little bit more difficult than it does in most years. Yeah. So Josh, he's really shown that he by far has the best game on the planet right now with the quality of wins that he has this season. He's
won 5 of his last 8 starts. And out of those 3 times he didn't win, they were both second place finishes.
Right.
So it's like, it's a crazy clip to be on. And the only question I think anybody really has is like, when do you get tired? When does it just not work? Let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum. Who needs a good US Open performance this week? Who do we need to see something out of?
I'm kind of leaning towards some of the live guys. I think I look at like Rahm and Brooks and put them in that similar category. I know Brooks won last year and Rahm's, been recently a winner, but they've kind of been no-shows a little bit in majors. Rahm more than Brooks this season. So I think we're going to need a good sighting out of them to kind of bring that live brand up a little bit. We have seen guys like Bryson DeChambeau kind of carry the flag for live this year at majors. Neiman's played well too. Cameron Smith has played well too. But I think they're going to need some of their big guns to continue it. Throw Dustin Johnson in that category too as well. He's been abysmal at the major so far this season. So throw him in there too. And I think live needs a little bit better week out of their big guns. Not saying that they've had bad experiences at the majors this year, but those big guys just haven't played well. Yeah,
I don't want to point to Brooks or Rahm yet, because I feel like it's just too soon. Because I feel like
it is very soon,
especially for Brooks. I mean, he won a major last year.
We're a year away, right?
Yeah, like he won a major last year, and let's not forget, like he's he's got a limited number of opportunities now to show himself to that global audience that watches and sees the PGA Tour week in and week out. Say what you will about LIV being a more global brand. It's not reaching the same audience that the PGA Tour is. So I don't put him in that category. Like I think he's not quite there. To me, it's still, I would put 2 players in there. 3. I'll pick 3. Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth. They're my long-term players now that I want to see them contend or win to really shut me up at a major, because they have just not lived up to their legacies thus far in the last, couple calendar years. And then my short-term one, I guess, would be Victor Hovland, because I'm really concerned about what I saw last week. And I want to see him just put this behind him so quickly and just be back in the mix this weekend, so I can say, okay, that what happened at the Memorial was just a blip. No big deal. Let's move on.
And then you look at like Cantlay too, who played very bad at the Memorial, who's looked to have been trending towards the better spot. So I think Cantlay is another guy you can I look at that needs a big U.S. Open. A guy who hasn't won a major and a guy who really needs it, especially with his position on the PGA Tour and kind of all the stuff he's went through over the past year. So he's a guy that I look at maybe more than those LIV guys that I mentioned that really needs a big week.
Yeah, Cantlay's really struggling. He's really struggled this entire year. And I almost wonder if he's struggling a bit from the weight of what he is working on with the tour, being a part of the group that's essentially negotiating the future unification of the game with the PIF. So he's definitely one that we're going to keep talking about, especially since he doesn't have a major victory. Let's talk, before we talk about the Olympics, let's get into Rahm. You mentioned him needing a good week this coming week. With draws this past weekend in Houston, what's going on with him? What do you think is happening there with him?
Yeah, it's interesting if it's mental or if it's more physical. We saw some clips from the LIV where he had an issue on the tee box too, where he kind of, I don't know if he stumbled or what happened with his ankle. It looked like a little bit. Josh, we don't know the severity of this. It doesn't look like it's going to monitor him or hamper him that much at the U.S. Open. He's still in the field, obviously, at this time. So I think he'll be fine, Josh. I think if this happened to him last week at the U.S. Open, if the U.S. Open was last week, I think he continues to play. Yeah. But because it's a LIV event in Houston where it's 1,000 degrees, right? I think he kind of just says, okay, that's enough, and we're going to rest up for next week's U.S. Open. And I think LIV's fine with that too. They know the U.S. Open's coming up, so they want him to rest and get ready and showcase their tour with one of their bigger players. So I think that's interesting, Josh. But yeah, the mental side, we've seen him be very distraught at majors so far this year. So we'll see if that happens at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, he's in a weird place to me. Since leaving for LIV, he just hasn't looked the same. I'm not, like I said, I don't think he's really in he needs to play well territory. But he just doesn't look like the guy who a year ago was being compared every week to Scottie Scheffler. Like if we look at the trajectory of Scottie Scheffler and the trajectory of Jon Rahm, they are going opposite directions, and they went opposite directions in a big way. And it's kind of sad. We were talking before we came on this morning that like him going to LIV, once you got the initial criticism out of the way of taking the money and going to play there after you had said you weren't interested in that, you really had an opportunity, I think, for both tours to have like a guy that could be argued as legitimately the best player in the world. And we've seen Scottie go off on a tear, and we've seen what he's done. And Rahm just hasn't. He's looked uncomfortable. He's looked like he's had trouble adjusting. He's obviously been vocally frustrated with some of the noise. He's openly talked about some of the things that he thinks will change with LIV tournaments as time goes on. But it's just one of those situations where, bottom line, he is not the player he was a year ago. So at the end of the day, I think it would be good for golf if he showed up and he played really well this week, because he wasn't a factor at all at Augusta.
Oh, it's absolutely good for golf. He shows them plays well. And I think he kind of needs to, in that sense, where to kind of solidify his decision a little bit to the common man. But we don't know what's going on in the head of Jon Rahm. But yeah, definitely need to see a little bit more of the comfortable Spaniard as we get closer and closer to the Olympics too, and the major season starts to wind down here.
Yeah, let's talk about the Olympics. Fourth Team USA spot up for grabs. Who do you like? Who do you not like? What are you paying attention to?
Yeah, I'm really paying attention to that fourth spot. I mean, Scottie and Xander are lockier than locks. I mean, Scottie Scheffler and Xander Schauffele winning the major this season. Scottie also winning the major and being just dominant, as we've talked about so far, are locks to be on the team. Looks like Wyndham Clark is going to be fine in that third spot for the Americans.
Yep.
And that fourth spot's a little bit more up in the air. Morikawa did a really good job in kind of jockeying that for that fourth spot in there. You have Homa breathing down his neck a little bit. He's played kind of up and down. Yeah. Cantlay, we've mentioned, not playing his best golf right now. And then you have Sahith Theegala kind of jumping into that other spot right behind Homa, kind of peering his head in there. Looks like Morikawa is going to be able to handle it. We only have one more week to kind of decide who is going to go in terms of all the countries too. But Josh, yeah, it's fun to kind of look at those updates. I think the bigger kind of race is up in Canada. We've seen like Nick Taylor has that solid spot for the first spot for the Canadians, and then you've seen Adam Hadwin and Corey Connors kind of exchange blows, and Hadwin played really well this last week at the Memorial, kind of the show to get that second spot for our neighbors to the north. So Josh, some kind of fun little things to look out for this week at the U.S. Open to see who gets on those U.S. Open teams for their countries.
Yeah, and Adam Hadwin's been playing some golf the last few weeks. He has been playing some serious golf, so good to see there as well. To me, Colin right now is the third best player in the world, just based on how he's played for, say, the last 3 or 4 months. And because of that, that's why it feels like it's a must having him on the team. I understand the points and the breakdown and qualifying and all that kind of stuff. But, Patrick Cantlay, Max Homa, no offense, neither of them have played even fractionally as well as Colin Morikawa has. And, Team USA bringing those 3 players alone to the Olympics would really be a challenge for the rest of the field. Out of the 4, I think you would make the argument if Colin was a part of the 4, Wyndham is the weakest link out of them. And he hasn't played poorly at all, but like to see those, to have those 3 or 4 guys representing Team USA, just a juggernaut of a team.
So let me give you a hypothetical here. Bryson DeChambeau or Brooks Koepka wins the U.S. Open, and then they're left off the Olympic team.
That'll happen.
Because they need OWGR points to get on the Olympic team. That sparks a huge interest in, we just had this last year with the Ryder Cup talking about Bryson. What if one of them wins the U.S. Open and then they're left off the Olympic team? What does that sort of do? Especially if, a guy like Colin Morikawa or even Wyndham Clark they play bad, say they miss the cut, and then a live guy in terms of Bryson or Brooks wins. What are we talking about next week?
I don't think it changes anything because look at the end of the day, the biggest in my mind, take OWGR out of the equation. I don't think the live schedule creates enough of a sample size to justify bringing guys to something like this. Ryder Cup is totally different because that decision is made, I think, towards the end of the live season as well. But at the end of the day, there just aren't enough live events early enough in the year when qualification is actually happening to justify bringing them. It becomes kind of like a clickbaity topic, I guess, to talk about or debate if Bryson were to turn around and win. But at the end of the day, consistency is what you're looking for in this, right? And Colin Morikawa is, again, in my mind, third best player in the world, even ahead of a guy like Rory McIlroy. Just based on, I know Rory has that win a couple weeks ago, but we've seen him contend, and we've seen him completely disappear. Like this past weekend, he wasn't even a factor, just gone from into the abyss. So, like Colin has been there week in and week out, and I think it's hard to make an argument against him. I think moving forward, when we fast forward another few years, there's got to be a way for live guys to be a part of that a part of that process.
Yeah, I think, next time they do the Olympics in 4 years, there'll be a different play in place. I think by that time, OWGR will be kind of, I don't know if defunct is the right word or what it will kind of look like in 4 years. But I think that qualification is going to be different. That all hinges on what happens between the PIF and the PGA Tour. And that all hinges on a lot of other stuff too. So I think just so much in professional golf in terms of that is going to change.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say over the next calendar year, it might take more than that. Who knows?
Agreed. Fully. Hey, we're going to have more content in the next few days. Nate, you're going to have picks coming up towards the middle of the week. We'll have all the U.S. Open news as it breaks throughout the week as well on our socials. But that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. We'll be back next week after the Open. Follow us over on TikTok and Instagram and here on YouTube if you want more. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.